Hello, and a very warm welcome to this podcast from Management Futures. I'm Hugh Reynolds, I'm Head of Digital Learning, and in this series I'm holding some informal conversations with my colleagues, associates and friends. They're all expert practitioners in fields related to, but not restricted to, coaching, culture and inclusive leadership development. All things that enable individuals, teams and organisations to thrive. In this episode, we're going to get to know one of our outstanding people. He's Simon Eastwood, and he's Head of Leadership Skills. Simon is a true master in supporting leaders and their teams to get from good to great. I wanted to find out how he goes about doing that and explore together how he's a huge advocate of learning by doing. So, we got together on the deck of the floating harbour studio boat in Bristol, where we had a really insightful chat. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it. Simon, hello. Thank you so much for coming to Bristol and to this lovely boat.
Well, it's beautiful to be here. It's lovely.
We're not going to sail away anywhere on this boat. I think it's very tightly moored. But we want to go on a journey of discovery through the world of Simon and your practice. So you're Head of Leadership Skills Development at Management Futures. And I want to understand what that means.
Well, that means that in terms of what we focus on, in terms of leadership, it's very much to do with the skills part of it. So anything that we think is a subject that's pertinent to leaders, to help them to be the best they can be, but it has to be underpinned by something tangible that they can practice, it's skills-based, it's transferable.
Okay, so we're not eschewing theory, we've not got nothing against theory,
No.
But the thing that we do really well is the doing, the practice.
Yeah.
Rehearsing
and absolutely,
even?
rehearsing. Yes, so I mean the theory, you have to have some theory that's grounded in something practical. That's pertinent to what you are doing, but it's about bringing the theory to life and putting it into practice. And you say rehearsing, absolutely. I mean, the process for us of learning when it comes to any kind of communication or leadership is you've got to have a chance to practice in the security of and the safety of a training room with people who build some trust with you and make you feel comfortable. You rehearse, you practice, you get feedback, which is another absolutely critical part of this, and you go again. So that by the time you get to the end of the experience, you're feeling confident that you can put what you've learned into practice immediately.
So in this experiential learning that you're giving people here, what is the role of challenge here? Because we want to make it comfortable, and a comfortable space, a safe space to try things out perhaps. But what's the role of challenge and challenging people to be better at what they do?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I think so. It does start with creating the trust and showing that we're all human. We're all prone to these mistakes and not getting it right. So you create that foundation, a bit of humour, a bit of connection, a bit of warmth, all those kind of things, which I think is so important. But the challenge will be in the feedback that you give. So, in terms of the feedback, there will always be something the person is doing well or looking to do well, and there will be things we might be observing and picking up in the moment that might be getting in the way. And so I think it's the honesty, but couched in an evidence-based way in terms of giving feedback that makes sense, that is the key thing. And so I think what makes it challenging is that people have to try it out. Say, look, this is what I've spotted. I wonder if we could give it a go and you apply that particular skill and just see how it goes. So part of it is the preparedness of the person to put it into practice, sometimes in front of colleagues, sometimes one-to-one with us. So yeah, if they're up for it, they get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and there's no sort of sitting in the back seat, it's all sort of there in the front. Doing it in that safe space, as you say, sometimes in front of colleagues, sometimes one-to-one work, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think one-to-one work is more and more. So we'll do many programs with groups, but when it comes often to the real intensive practice, we'll separate into smaller groups again, because I think it's really important people feel it's not too many eyes on you.
Yeah.
There's real benefits actually from doing it in a small group with colleagues, because you get their perspective, you get their feedback, so it's not just me giving feedback. One-to-one, it is just me giving feedback or one of my colleagues, but what we can do is make it very bespoke to that person, and we can stop and start and make it an intensive 1 hour, if you like.
Well, I was interested when you mentioned evidence, because obviously the research that you draw on in the work that you do is evidence-based. But is there also evidence from the participants' practice coming to bear? Are they bringing things to you, bringing problems or issues or skills that might not be quite working for them in the workplace?
Absolutely. So if it was working on, say, something like giving feedback or courageous conversations along those lines, what we would always ask is people to think before they're coming to a session, whether it's a group session or one-to-one, what is it I want to work on? What's the scenario that I could hang this on? What do I want from as a result of this training or this conversation I want to practice? What might be getting in the way? What are the stories I'm telling myself, the assumptions I'm making that could be getting in the way of me having a more fruitful conversation with someone in my team? So they come well armed, if you like. We'll do some input and do some demos, but when it comes to the actual practice, I'm really crystal clear on what they want to work on. I'll ask them some supplementary questions, so let's just get really clear on what you want. And I think it's always important, if you're going to be practicing with people in a way that feels very real to them, they should be able to have some time out. There is a get out clause. Often there'll be people saying, I'd never say that. I don't know why I'm saying that. And you say, okay, well, let's rewind and start again. What would you say? Imagine I am that person. So it's quite an intensive, quite some improvisation going on from my standpoint. I just think it seems to always be the thing that people remember.
Is them doing it themselves and going through it.
Because it
role
feels
play?
real.
Because some people are a bit allergic to role play.
Yeah, I know.
As soon as we
Yes.
mention that it's going to happen, it sort of puts a few shutters down or up against it.
Well, do you know what the difference is? A couple of things. What I tend to couch it as being is that we're going to workshop a conversation. If it's about that particular subject. And what I will always say is this isn't role-playing. It is you practicing a skill with someone, me or one of my fantastic associates, who have the confidence and are comfortable with making it feel real and committing to whatever the person has described that person as being. So my colleague is X, Y, and Z personality type. This is how they tend to respond. And it's really important that we can make it feel real. It doesn't have to be a mimicking of that person. It's rare we'll actually, absolutely emulate them. But it's got to feel real so that the person almost, does forget they're practicing. They feel they're in the middle of it. And then you can really work on people then and give them feedback that feels real.
Yeah. So you've built that trust and they're feeling it as a real experience within. Now, I wonder if we could explore perhaps the courageous conversations and particularly mastering skills of feedback.
Yeah.
Giving these messages or giving this news that people sometimes don't want to hear. Are there processes or models that you use within something like that? So tell us a bit about the structure or the process that you go through in the work that you do there.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think that what we would typically say is, look, there is the skill of giving the feedback itself, which is one part of the conversation. And, we've got various models, approaches. A lot of feedback models tend to come down to the same thing, is that make feedback evidence-based. It factually happened or it didn't happen. This was said or it wasn't said, not your personal interpretation or generalization. So, for example, if you wanted to give feedback to someone, you're practicing on the fact that you find them quite aggressive in meetings, it doesn't really help to label people with things like, I find you really aggressive. It's describing what they said and did is much safer ground. So we'll work on a model which helps them to make that really clear. But then there's all the other things that you bring into a conversation you're having with people. What's the story you're bringing in into the room when you're having a conversation with someone who perhaps has triggered you a number of times, and you've probably triggered them. We're all going around triggering each other, actually, quite often. And, tell yourself a different story. How are you going to manage your own emotional responses? How are you going to demonstrate this is not an attack? This is because I want us to work more effectively. I want the best for you. What's your outcome you want? Are you going to listen more than you speak? All those factors come into having those conversations.
I'm going to try to listen more than I speak, but it's one thing that I personally find quite difficult. I'm just thinking about that situation of somebody that I might initially think is aggressive, or I might label with an emotive word there. Are you saying that if I were to take something specific that they did, or a situation that I found myself in, how might I reposition that in terms of language or the way that I'm thinking about that situation? Does the specificity matter as well?
I think the specificity does matter, and also the impact of what they've said or done, because there's absolutely no point in giving anyone feedback. And by the way, this is absolutely for positive feedback as well. It's so much more meaningful when it has some substance and some detail, and there's a consequence that you've noticed. Either very positive or perhaps wasn't as positive it could be. So, I mean, you've got to also find your own language. So if I was helping someone to give feedback on, for example, being aggressive, or giving someone feedback on their being aggressive, my words may not be suitable for their words. So it might just be, look, you're giving feedback to someone who's been aggressive, and you might just say, look, I noticed a few times in the meeting you raised your voice a number of times, and I know when Jane was speaking, you were shaking your head a fair bit when she was communicating, and I just noticed she looked uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable, and we didn't really pursue that particular angle anymore. But you've got to find your own words. It shouldn't sound too management speaky.
Right.
And of course, I always say with something like feedback, that's just the beginning of the conversation. You're given the feedback. Now the real conversation starts, seeking to understand them, coming to an agreement, being humble enough to say, I may have misread that. I may be wrong. I'm just giving you my honest opinion or my own thoughts. And I think that's a really important part of it. You've got to, I think, whenever you're having these kinds of conversations, you've got to be real. It can't be, right, I'm bringing you in to give you feedback. I could be wrong.
It can sometimes feel like feedback's given for the sake of feedback as well. Do you find that feedback can be given a little bit too frequently, or perhaps for the wrong reasons sometimes? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, actually, I've written up recently the do's and don'ts of giving feedback, and one of them is frequency. People always dread, oh, can I just give you some feedback? And you're unleashing hell if you sort of promote feedback as the only way people go around communicating within an organisation. It's to be used saliently, effectively, when it matters, when someone can do something about what you're giving them feedback about. They can see it, they recognise that it's coming from a genuinely a good place. It's not an act of having won over someone. There's lots of obvious stuff, but I think it's dictated to about, what's your emotional baggage in this particular conversation as well.
It's sounding like you're getting quite deep, or very deep with people. Do you find that people are opening up more when they come to you, or do you find yourself going to some places that they didn't expect, or even you didn't expect?
Yeah, I think, I hope it's to do with the relationship and the connection you create with someone, so they know that you want the best for them as well. And when you have that basis, and they also believe that you're credible enough, that you know what you're talking about, and you're comfortable trying stuff out with them to make them feel comfortable. It can be intensive. Sometimes people go, oh, I never realised that. I never realised I did that. Because you make an observation. I noticed that. And that's why I think, we talk about giving feedback as a skill of leadership. It is also a skill of being a trainer and a coach. In skills work, is that you've got to be spotting the specifics. And by the way, of course, whilst also getting the person to feel they're dealing with a real person,
Yes.
and they're not role playing and they're all about to corpse and have a laugh,
Yeah.
and make life purposely difficult for each other. It's got to feel real, whilst having a third eye looking down, going, what am I noticing? Also, I'm not performing. It's not about, I'm not taking centre stage here as the facilitator. You know, it could be, I can see some people could become rather tempted to make it a performance. I'm going to inhabit the role of the person they've described. It's not about that. It's about the other person.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff going on simultaneously.
It sounds. I mean, just life in general is a complex, dynamic system,
Absolutely.
and here we're putting it into the room, and sort of adding layers of complication
Yes.
above it, so that you can draw out for people something that's going to be useful.
Absolutely.
How's it going so far? Just a reminder that you're listening to a podcast from Management Futures. I'm Hugh Reynolds, Head of Digital, and I'm talking to my expert colleague Simon Eastwood about his work as Head of Leadership Skills Development. Thanks so much for listening in, and let's hear more from Simon about the things he does to embed learning and make sure that it has lasting impact on performance. How do you make the learning sticky? How do you leave people with something that is going to go on and support them, rather than just something that comes out of their head the next day?
I think that's a really good question, because a bugbear I have is, you know, you put so much effort in, they've put so much effort in, and a week later, life's taken over and they haven't put it into practice. So first of all, the training itself, the experience should be powerful enough and practical enough that they absolutely come away with the confidence to put it into practice. And we will challenge people to be accountable. So when are you going to put this into practice, and who will you be having this conversation with, and who do you know that you can go and talk to say you're committing to doing something? So there's already accountability built in the training session, but we will then encourage and work with our clients to create learning sets, for example. So at the end of any program, they will work with 4, 5, maybe 6 other people and agree and be accountable for doing it. They're going to meet every month or every 6 weeks, and they're going to check in with each other. You said you were going to do X and apply this skill. What did you do? What worked? What didn't work? Another bit of stickiness would be around the resources that we will provide, that goes beyond just, we'll send you some slides.
Right, so you come in, you're doing your thing, you might give people the slides, but you've already said earlier in the conversation about bringing in ideas before they meet you, so giving them things to consider before they actually come and do the session with you. Are you saying that you're leaving people with things as well, with a legacy resource?
Absolutely. So at the end of any kind of session we'll run, any program we'll run, what we're actually now working, and you and I have started to work on this, and I'm really excited by it, which is one resource for giving feedback called My Feedback Planner. And so people can go into, via a little portal, they can go into this very dynamic resource, and at the heart of it is, I'm going to plan having a conversation that I need to have, and I just want some guidance from what I remember on the session that we were involved in. And so it guides you. And one of the first questions we ask is, what do you really want to say?
It's like, just let loose.
Yeah, don't worry. There's no consequences. Get it out of your system. And so they'll get that down. And then we take them through a pathway of making things evidence-based. Lots of reflective questions, which they can either skip or not skip, just to sort of decide, what part am I playing in this? What might be the intentions of the other person that I haven't recognised? What behaviours am I overplaying that might be triggering them? It's not just about them triggering me. And then just taking them on that journey, introducing them to the tools, the videos, and then click go, and they get their feedback emailed. So it's far more powerful than just something static sent.
I got really excited when you had this idea. I got excited about implementing it, because it's really giving people a gift, that they can take forward. And when they might come back and have another session with you later on in the year, say, but this is something that any time of the day or night they can come and try out, or if they're worried about something, or they need to check back and refer to things that you've already taught them, they can come and have this
Yes.
little goodie that they can
Go
roll
try
out.
it. Or get the mobile out. And
Yes,
go, got a
indeed,
really
yeah.
tough conversation in
Of
5
course.
minutes.
Yeah.
My feedback planner.
Yeah.
Bang, 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 and off they go.
Yeah, so it's really excited me as head of digital, building things like this and augmenting the wonderful
Yeah,
face-to-face
absolutely.
work and online work that you do, Simon, augmenting it with these other resources.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could just give people a flavour of the range of things. We mentioned courageous conversations and mastering feedback skills. But I know your typical week or month involves lots of different topics, so could you give us some of those
Yes.
topics?
Absolutely. So there'll be things like personal impact and influencing, negotiation skills, collaboration skills, team coaching skills from a leadership and managerial point of view,
Yes.
applying some fundamental skills that help to unlock and empower people, moving away from tell. And then actually perhaps some sort of wider ranging subjects like leadership of self, strategic leadership, critical thinking. So that becomes a little bit more cerebral, if you like. But what we will do on all those sessions is look always to what can we do that's going to be practical, where people can try stuff out, get some feedback and feel confident about applying it. So whatever it is, it has to pass through that kind of criteria. It has to be able to be transferable.
And it's not one size fits all. So if you're working with an individual, you're working with a group or an organisation in a wider programme, you're thinking about the bespoke way in which you'd work with those people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. What is it specifically they as a team, as an organisation want to achieve? Therefore, where do we need to ramp it up? And where do we need to tweak? So, we'll have the foundations of what we fundamentally believe in that are just universal skills, universal truths of communication and leadership. But I think you've got to absolutely tailor it to the needs of that particular group. It could be down to their, preference for learning. It could just be about their personality type. If you've got a group of, for example, we've got a fantastic team, very technical, brilliant. This is very cliched here, but they tend to be a little bit more introspective, and we want to hear their voices in the room. That's going to be quite different from working with a team of people who are in high-end sales and love talking.
Yes. Yeah.
So you work on different criteria.
And you do that in discussion with the group or with the HR team in place. So you wouldn't just make those assumptions. You're having those discussions and conversations with people.
A massive part for me is, again, this is sustaining learning, is that when we're working with the HR or the L&D team or individual who's the heading up the program internally, it's got to be a partnership. It can't be, right, got the job, do the job, get out. It's got to be a continuous dialogue. There's got to be a lot of reviews, a lot of working with them. You both got to have skin in the game. If I'm working with someone in the L&D team, we're accountable for X, Y, and Z. We can only take it so far. We'll even help and equip you, give you the backup and support to take it further. But we have to work together.
Yeah. So it's a collaborative approach and you get real engagement
Absolutely.
with the stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
Simon, could I ask you about something you mentioned there was coaching. And at Management Futures, we put coaching at the heart of everything we do. And I work with a lot of coaches and I kind of understand the coaching world a bit better than I understand the leadership skills world. Could you tell me about those two things though? How is what you're doing distinctive from coaching? I'm sure there are some overlaps, but how is it differentiated from coaching?
Yeah, as you say, there are points where it overlaps. The key difference is that when you're a skills practitioner, if you like, and let's say I was working with you for an hour on a particular skill, a good 85% of that, maybe 90%, will be just practice. So, I might typically at the beginning, again, having had some information's come through that they've worked on, so I'm clear about things from the word go. Supplementary questions, what is it you really want to get from this session, etc. Let's give it a go. Okay, so no lots of input up front, just let's give it a go. So you might, for example, I was working with with a client a while ago, and they had got feedback, and all credit to them. They'd got feedback from their team, and they decided to do something about it. Not always, leaders don't always do that. Too proud to change. And basically, the client said, look, he was a lovely person, but I'm not always apparently good at getting my messages over. I never know when to stop speaking, and people aren't clear on what the outcome is. And I just need to be better at communicating. So I said, okay, well, let's give it a go. Take your last meeting. Imagine I'm one of a group of people here. How did you start it? And so they have a go. And I've already started to pick up on what I think might be getting in the way before they've even had a go, because I've spoken to them. Yeah. But we'll have a practice. Then I can immediately give some feedback on what I think they do very well. And there is always something the person does well, because they wouldn't be where they are in the job they're doing if they were
so you've got to catch
unable.
them
Got to catch
on their
it,
best
keep it actually specific, absolutely.
Right.
And then very quickly move to, look, there's a few things I spotted, and I wonder if, just with a simple tweak, introduce a model or introduce a technique more, and skill and approach. Just try it.
Yeah.
So we might do a little skills practice away from that meeting scenario, and then say, give it a go. And I think that was brilliant. Now let's apply it. Let's go back to that meeting and start it, overlaying it with that skill. So they'll have a go. And then we will stop and start, travel through the conversation, and then we'll have a moment of reflection, what they learnt, and then what next? And we'll broaden it, and I'll introduce more skills. And the key thing is, where coaching similarities comes in is so what are you going to do now as a result
Committing
of this?
To
Yes,
action.
yeah. And if we're working very closely with the coach on a particular area, Coaching Plus, which we started introducing, the key thing is the coach, not me, the skills practitioner, is the key contact for the client.
Yeah.
I'm just helicoptered in to do a skills session, equip them, helicopter out. That's their coaching relationship.
So just to summarise there, that in a coaching relationship where the agenda belongs to the client might be working with the coach to understand what the issue is that they should be working on or want to be working on. Your role is then to come in and work with them on that thing, on a well-defined specific thing that they're going to improve on. And you're going to be more directive than a coach would be.
Definitely.
So if I was coaching that person, I wouldn't be telling them what to do, but they've sort of committed to coming to you and doing some work together, listening to you, taking your suggestions, trying things, putting that into practice, and then doing reviews with yourself, but also perhaps circling back round to the coach. Would it work in that way as well?
Yes, and I will definitely be asking questions, definitely really listening, applying that.
Another
coaching
great
is the
coaching
heart
skill.
of things. Yes, the coaching skill. However, people sometimes just want to hear the feedback. They want a bit of direction. But of course, they have ownership eventually. And we'll circle back, and some things might come out in the wash they hadn't expected. So, for example, I was working with this client, and they improved no end by the end of the session. What they discovered was what was driving this behaviour in the first place was the lack of confidence. So they filled the space. They did all this rambling, partly because they didn't have the confidence to stop and pause and hold the space. That wouldn't be my domain as a skills practitioner. That's for them to go and work on in a coaching capacity.
Yeah. So I'm hearing the difference. I'm also hearing that it's a partnership between yourself and the person's coach, and that you're both incredible allies to that person.
Absolutely. And what I would say is, just to sort of be really clear, there's coaching, there's skills work, which can work independently with the client. Never do they cross. Coaching Plus, which is something we've introduced recently, but is working very closely with the coaching department, is that hybrid service as described. So they get two people, one a coach, one a skills practitioner, which I think is great.
And just finally, Simon, one thing on people's minds might be about the confidentiality of that coaching relationship and the information that flows between you and a coach, or things that I take to a coaching that I wouldn't expect to be revealed elsewhere. How is that in this relationship?
So I do not. So, for example, the coach will not tell me anything of the details of the.
There's a wall between
you. There's a wall,
right? Yeah.
And I will just know this person wants to work on a particular skill. They need to articulate that directly to me.
Yeah.
Once we've gone through that process, I'm giving it back to the coachee. I don't go back to the coach and say, well, the coachee has said this and they want that. I said, so that's about accountability for the coachee.
Yes.
It's not for me to...
it goes through the participant.
It always comes through. They are the ones who hold the information.
Right.
That information never crosses the line.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for going on this journey, a voyage of discovery into the world of Simon and your work as head of leadership skills at Management Future. It's been great to be on that journey with you, and really look forward to more conversations like this in the future.
Absolutely,
Simon.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have. Take care. Thanks so much for lending us your ears. We really hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you'd like to explore more around this topic or other shared interests, do please visit us at www.managementfutures.co.uk. There, you can find lots more really useful content in our resources section, including that My Feedback Planner tool that Simon mentioned, and other cool things that he, myself, and the team have made. Until next time, take care.